being aware is to practice being aware. Seems obvious, right? But the thing that you have to understand is that in the conditioned state that most of us are living in, we are not aware. We're aware of the mental activity and we think that's reality. And we don't know it. We don't know that we think that's reality. You know, if you pay attention, and this is the case for all of us, by the way, nobody's excluded here, right? If you pay attention, you'll notice when you leave this room tonight and you get in your car and you start driving home, you will go back into the default state. And the default state is, I think I'm thinking my thoughts. That's the default state. And when you're in the default state, thinking your thoughts, right? You're also believing that what you feel is an accurate reaction or an accurate response to what's happening. You believe that. You believe when you're angry that what you're angry about is legitimate, don't you? Yeah, and then you're going to try and change what you're angry about because, why? Because it's disturbing you. Why is it disturbing you? Because you're living a life at effect. You're living your life at effect. You're living your life as a function of the circumstances that you're in. That's why it's disturbing you. That's why everything is disturbing us all the time, right? Because we're dependent on circumstances in order for our well-being. Okay? So what's the possibility that these teachings are pointing to? To stop being dependent on circumstances because the circumstances are going to fail you. Your life will not work if you're dependent on circumstances. They're going to fail you. Your mind is very vulnerable. Your body is very vulnerable. Your life is very vulnerable when you're dependent on circumstances because they're always changing, and a lot of the time they're challenging and negative, right? Same thing with your emotions. It's always changing, and a lot of times it's challenging and negative, and a lot of times it takes you over and has you behave according to it. And when you do that, you're creating negative consequences that you then have to suffer. And of course, we don't take responsibility for the suffering. We blame it on the circumstances. Either somebody's making me angry, somebody's making me afraid, somebody's causing me to suffer, or the circumstances are causing me to, experience my life in the way that I'm experiencing in terms of suffering. So what's the alternative to that? The alternative to that we call the natural state. What's the natural state? The natural state is Satchidananda. The natural state is that what I depend on for my experience of well-being is the experience of my existence itself as awareness. A baby knows this. It hasn't been conditioned yet to be stupid. Right? A baby's experience of well-being is a function of its existence itself. It's experiencing the excitement of existing itself. If you look at a baby's face, the baby is experiencing the excitement of being alive, right? As soon as you learn to be a human being, you learn not to be excited about being alive, right? Now you learn to be coping with being alive, putting up with life instead of being excited that you're alive. And then when the time comes to die, right? It's pretty natural, it's pretty automatic when the time comes to die, we start to realize, oh shit, I missed it. I missed the opportunity of experiencing the excitement of being alive, and now that I'm about to lose it, I notice that I missed it. And when I missed it because I was living my life in a mental state instead of living my life in life. If you're living your life in life, you're allowing yourself to be with life as life is. And when you're being with life as life is, there's no problem. What's the problem? You know, as my Zen teacher said, the state of enlightenment is equal to the state of deep sleep. Why would that be the case? Because in deep sleep, you're not there. That's pointing at the problem. Right? Once you show up, the shit starts to go bad. Once you show up, the problems occur. Why? Because in the mental state, there's always a comparison going on between what I want, what I like, the way it should be, what's the right thing, and what's happening, right? It's always going on, and whenever and this is all automatic, happening all the time. You don't even notice it, right? You're totally identified with it, right? And whenever what's going on doesn't meet what you like and what feels right to you or what's convenient to you or what you agree with, right? What do you do with it, right? You reject it. You reject it. So you're rejecting your life. You're rejecting reality when you reject it. You're rejecting reality and you're living in a mental state in which you're suffering the experience of things being different than the way you want them to be. And that will never work. It will never work. The biggest thing, I've said this over and over again, the only value in recognizing what you are as a personality is the failure of being that. That's the only value of it at all. It has no other value, right? Because as the Buddhists say, when you're in the identity of a personality, you're experiencing yourself as a hungry ghost. First of all, the personality isn't real. It doesn't actually exist, right? So you're identifying yourself as a ghost. And secondly, the personality is never satisfied. So you're a hungry ghost. Yeah? And if you die as a hungry ghost, you were never here and you were never satisfied. You were never experiencing the possibility of being with your life and being in the world with other people. This is why the training of the mind is so important. How did you get this way? The way you get out of this is the same way you got into this. How did you get into this? You got into this when you were too young and naive and innocent to know any better. You had no choice about being conditioned, did you? That's how you got into this. And how did that conditioning occur? It occurred by repetition, didn't it? Repeating over and over again. Oh, what is my name? David. Okay, I got to remember that. After a while, I don't have to remember that, right? Where do I live? I have to remember that. Oh, well, I remember my stepson used to say, when we used to leave the house and go somewhere, do you know how to get back? You sure you know how to get back? Right? But after a while, you realize you don't have to remember that anymore. It becomes your identity. It becomes your identity. And you don't realize that this repetition, the most repetitious thing you do is identify with your physical body. That's the heart of the conditioning, is to take yourself to be your physical body. And once you take yourself to be the physical body, right, then your destiny is to live your life as that body, which means that when it's hurting, you're hurting, not it's hurting, you're hurting. When it's sick, you're sick, not it's sick, you're sick. When it gets old, you're old, not it's old, you're old. And when it dies, you die, right? So you have the fate of your body when you take yourself to be the body. And when you go to practice meditation, unless you make the distinction, the Zen teacher said this during the talk that he gave, which I think is very, very important on the nature of consciousness. And in that talk, he said, if you're not clear about the nature of consciousness, right, you will have a lot of trouble practicing meditation. And if the way you practice meditation is the way you do everything else, right, which is something you're doing, right, you're not practicing meditation, you're wasting your time. And you're making it worse because you're increasing the identity. You're increasing the identity of yourself as a personality when you're doing meditation. It's not a do. Meditation is not a do. Meditation is a be. It's a state of being, not a state of doing, right? So how do you be what you already are? You don't do anything. Are you doing anything to be your awareness? Are you practicing being your awareness? Are you practicing getting better at being your awareness, right? It's like practicing seeing, Are you trying to improve your seeing? Right? You're trying to improve your hearing? I'm not talking about, whether or not the senses are working well. I'm talking about your natural experience of seeing. It just happens. Awareness just happens. You don't have to do anything, right? It's not a do, right? So in meditation, what you're practicing meditation is like practicing falling asleep. It's like practicing falling asleep. You let it happen. You don't make it happen. You can't make yourself fall asleep, right? You'll never fall asleep if you're trying to make yourself fall asleep. You have to let sleep happen. You have to let go of being in control. You have to let yourself let go of being in control. When you're practicing meditation, it's very, very, very important to understand when you move attention from the thought activity, from the mental state, to being aware of the body breathing, you're moving your identity away from being a personality to being what you actually are. And you have to be aware that you are that when you're doing it. Otherwise, you're just being a personality trying to meditate. And that's not meditation. So you have to really be aware. You have to really, one of the things about calming the mind and relaxing the body, one of the most powerful ways of calming the mind and relaxing the body is practicing being awake and aware of your mind and body. That sounds like obvious, right? But how aware are you really of your mind and your body as you go through the day? You know, if you pay attention, you'll see you're not very aware at all. Unless your body hurts, you don't even know it's there, right? Unless there's a problem, you take it for granted. Same thing with the mind, right? If you start having a mental illness, if you start experiencing depression or anxiety, right, then you notice your mind because it's upset, it's disturbed, right? But under normal circumstances, when it's being normally crazy and stupid, you don't even notice it, right? Because you identify with it, and then you're being crazy and stupid, and then you get the results of being crazy and stupid, and you complain because you don't think it has anything to do with you. That's worse than being crazy. So the first thing you have to do is take responsibility for what's been running your life. If you're not aware of your mental activity and you don't see when it goes off the rails, then you're going off the rails. If you're not aware of your mental activity and you don't see when it's going off the rails, then you're dreaming, you're asleep. You don't know what's happening. You're not unaware of the reality of what's happening, right? So you literally have to practice this. You have to practice paying attention to your mind. And you have to practice paying attention to the thinking that's going on there and the emotions that are going in there, so you can see how when you identify with them, you're crazy. And you will see that you're crazy. You will see that you're blaming life and you're blaming other people and you're blaming the world and you're blaming the circumstances for not being what you want them to be, as if they're ever going to be what you want them to be. That's ridiculous. They're never going to be what you want them to be. Other people are never going to be who you want them to be. Yeah? The only way you can get along with other people is to understand that they're living their life as a point of view, and it's a different point of view than your point of view. And if you think that means that their point of view is wrong and your point of view is right, you're in the world of suffering. Because then all that's left to do is to try and change them or control them, right? How's that work? How's that going to work for you, right? How's that going to work for you? You have the space for people to be, you got to be the space for people to be where they're at. You have to be the space for you to be where you're at. Otherwise, you're just as much conflict with yourself as you are with everybody else. If you don't have the space to be where you're at, if you don't have the space to allow your mind to be the way it is. That's the first part of training your mind, is to accept that it's conditioned. And if you identify with it, then you're conditioned, right? If you accept that it's conditioned and you pay attention to the conditioning that exists there, right, then you can train it, right? Then you can stop identifying with it. You can stop allowing it to determine you. When a mind is trained, it serves you. When it's untrained, you serve it. And whatever you can see, you don't have to be. Don't forget that. That's very important. That's a wisdom statement. Whatever you can see, you don't have to be. When you practice being the awareness, from the view of awareness, you now see the personality instead of see from the personality. You get that? If you see the personality instead of seeing from the personality, what you're looking at changes. You don't see it from a conditioned lens, you see it from a clear lens. You see it more as it is instead of the way the personality sees it. The personality sees it as an interpretation. Right? You're never seeing things as they are, you're seeing things as the mind tells you they are. And that's not the way they are. Which means as long as you're dependent on the mental activity to be related to people, you're never related to people, you're related to your interpretation of people. That's a very important thing to understand. That's why the 8 verses of training the mind say what they say. Right? Because if you're going to train your mind, you have to train your mind to stop functioning as if things should be different and as people should be different, even as you should be different. And start to train your mind to be able to see things as they are. If you see life as life is, it's not a problem. It's just the way it is. The only way it can be a problem is if you think it should be different. Isn't that obvious? Right? And if you're experiencing problems, if you're experiencing agitation or anger or fear or states of upset, right? Then you're experiencing that there are problems where there are no problems. And you're creating those problems by the way you're interpreting what's happening all the time. You know, when I was talking to somebody today that was interviewing me to whether or not to be their therapist, which I think is a very interesting situation, they said to me, well, I've interviewed other therapists to determine whether I want to work with them, and they're very different from you. You know, what makes what you do different? And I said, I don't treat the personality. The personality is untreatable. The personality is unstable. The personality is changing all the time. It's changing how it sees things. It's changing what it sees. It's changing how it feels. It's changing how it behaves. That's the problem, right? So I don't treat the personality. I treat the person to realize, right, that they're not the person. A non-dual approach to psychotherapy. Non-dual psychotherapy is going to be the future of psychotherapy. Why? Because it's totally consistent with quantum physics, right? What's quantum physics? Quantum physics says that what you see is a gross interpretation of what is actually nothing at all. Do you know your body is actually nothing? At a quantum level, there is nothing there. So what are you seeing? You're seeing a mental projection. You're seeing a mental interpretation. Your mind is taking nothing and organizing it into form all the time. And you believe that form actually exists when it doesn't exist. Which means that you can literally change your experience of reality. Completely, you can change your experience of reality. Now, they're now doing research and brain research that is showing that if you incorporate concepts from quantum physics to train your mind and your brain, right, to relate to a perceived reality and experience that reality with clarity and consistency, that will become your reality, no matter what it is. And we're talking about people who've experienced things like having leukemia and then it disappears from their body, right? And what they're practicing is okay, if I had a healthy body, this is what they're learning. If I had a healthy body and my body was free and there was no leukemia there, right, what would my experience be? How would I see myself and how would I see my life and what would that feel like? And if you can conjure that up realistically enough and consistently maintain that conjuring up vision, right? Your brain doesn't know the difference. And it will literally change your body to match that vision. Now, most people don't have the practice and the ability to create that kind of vision and maintain it consistently, right? But we're now learning the technology to train people to do that. So where are we going here? You know, we're still in a primitive state. You have to understand that. How far out of the cave are we? We haven't yet learned not to kill each other. Right? How far out of the cave are we? Right? You know, we're still living in the dark. These are the dark ages. And this happens to be a dark part of the dark ages that we're in at this particular time, right? So you have to transcend it. These teachings and these practices are called transcendental wisdom. Your true nature is transcendental. What's that mean? It means you're in the world, but what you are is not in the world. What you are is not of this world. You're in this world, you're in this dream, you're in this projected reality for a temporary, brief time, right? But what you truly are is not of this world. The awareness that you are is not of this world. The awareness that you are has no form, has no needs, has no wants. It has a total affinity with everything that appears. You know, we talk in these teachings about the fact that you're not the body and you're not the mind. And the reason we talk that way, Rupert calls these concessions, temporary concessions. We talk that way is because you're stuck in the other side of things. You're stuck believing you are the body and you are the mind. So we talk you out of that by saying you're not the body and you're not the mind, right? But that's not the full answer. That's not the truth, right? The next step is you are the body and you are the mind. That completes the circle, right? Well, how can that be? Because the way it completes the circle is because in reality, the absolute truth is all there is consciousness. So if all there is consciousness, then everything in that consciousness is consciousness, which means your mind is that consciousness. Your mind is that awareness. Your body is that awareness. Your body is awareness that has manifested itself in form. That's what your body is. Your mind is awareness that has manifested itself in the form of a mental state and a thought process. And that comes together to be a human life, right? But if we only experience human life with the limitations that occur when that separation happens, which is inevitable, we can't be here in time and space and in form without forgetting our true nature. It won't work. It won't work. If you started being your pure awareness, right, you'd have to go into the psych hospital. You would, right? You would. If you were just being your awareness and you weren't identified with having a body anymore and having a mind, right, you'd have to go to the psych hospital. So you have to be able to be in the form you're in with the mind you have and know the truth. The truth shall set you free, right? But it won't set you free if you know about it. It'll only set you free if you be it. You get that? Knowing the truth, when they say the truth shall set you free, what they're referring to is when you're experiencing being what's true, you're free. Just to know about it won't make any difference, right? So what do you have to do? You have to use your life consciously and intelligently to train the mind and to train the body to be aligned with the wisdom of your true nature. You see? So you're not eliminating anything. You're not saying you're not anything. You're saying you are everything, right? But in the conditioned state, in the separated conditioned state, without reconnecting to the source, you have no place to get wisdom from. You can't get wisdom from your conditioning. Your conditioning is based on survival. Wisdom is not based on your survival. It's based on your state of health, wholeness, and well-being. It's based on your true nature. It's based on being love. Your true nature is love. What's love mean? It means you have an affinity for everything. You see everything as yourself. You see other people as yourself. That's what love is. And so as the 8 verses of training the mind say, if you're practicing being love, right, then you see anybody that is behaving in a way that creates conflict and suffering, right, to be your teacher. Yeah, because if you're seeing them that way, you're out of your love. If you're seeing them that way, you're not seeing them through the lens of love. So you have to practice that. You have to train your mind to get free from the conditioned state in which you feel threatened and separated from life and other human beings. And meditation is a way to begin to do that practice, formally and then informally. Formally, right, you're training your mind by practicing meditation consistently every single time exactly the same way. That's training your mind. No deviation. You do the technique exactly the same way. That's training your mind. And you do it repetitively. That's how you got crazy. Now you're going to go sane. Right? And then you start to practice meditation informally, meaning as you take time during the day, as often as you can remember, to rest as awareness for a brief moment, to be yourself for a brief moment. Keep practicing being yourself for brief moments. If you keep practicing being yourself for brief moments, at some point, those brief moments will become a critical mass, and you'll flip out of your personality into being your true nature. That's called enlightenment. Any questions? And let me tell you something. Coming to this class on a consistent basis makes a difference. Because where else in your life are you being exposed to wisdom and the truth? Where else in your life are you being exposed to what you can pay attention to, what you can focus on, right, that will transform your experience of your life? Where else are you going to get that? You can't get it in a college education. That's just information, right? So coming to this class on a consistent basis makes a difference because you're exposing yourself to reality when you come here. And if you don't come here, what's happening that's having you not come here? I can tell you the answer. You're prioritizing something that's more important than your well-being. That's what's happening. I can show you your mind. It's very easy to show you your mind. If I told all of you that if you come to class every time you come here, you'll get a check for $500. How hard will it be for you to come? That's your mind. That's your mind. If you're going to get something, then you'll play. If you're going to get something, right? But to just have the quality of your life improve, that's inconvenient. It's too cold. It's too cold. I don't feel like it. I don't feel like it. I don't feel too good today. I might miss my TV show tonight, you know. Let me have a beer instead of go there or smoke a joint. See what I'm saying? Your mind will always opt for convenience and comfort against your well-being. It'll trade it off all the time. It'll trade off your well-being for convenience and comfort. Having what I want and feeling the way I want to feel, right? We all know the truth that some of the best things for you in your life that will facilitate your health and well-being, right, are inconvenient. So what do you want to have, convenience or well-being? Make up your mind. You know, you can't have both. You can't have both. You have to be willing to deal with going out of your way and making yourself disciplined to do the things that work to facilitate your health and well-being, whether you feel like it or not. That's why when people tell me about meditation, like this person that I talked to today, and I hear this all the time. Have you ever practiced meditation? Well, yeah, I did, but not very consistently, and I'm not doing it now. All that person's telling me is my mind won. My mind determined what I was going to do. I knew meditation makes a difference. The science is there. We know brain science tells us now that meditation works. You're changing your brain when you practice meditation. They've done research on the brains of monks that practice meditation, and they have a different brain than most people. Why? Because of the practice of meditation. They've trained their brain. So we know it works. We know it works. So if you don't do it, right, who's running the show, you or your mind? You know, your mind will say, oh, I don't feel like it today. Oh, I'm too busy, too upset. You know, maybe I'll do it tomorrow if I feel like it. That's a hell of a life to lead, you know, to just only do what you feel like doing. You know, if you're a person that's talented physically, you have talent, you could be good at playing sports, right? But you can't master your mind, it's a waste of your talent. That's why people who are good at sports get a coach to make them train consistently all the time. Whether you feel like it or not, doesn't matter. And then they can perform at a peak level, right? What if we practiced living our lives that way? That we practice doing the things that work, no matter how we felt, and doing them with the consistency that will allow us to maximize our potential. What difference would that make? It would make an incredible difference, but very few people experience that difference because most people are living their life that their mind lets them live. Okay, peace be with you.
And with the spirit.